June 21st turned out to be a beautiful day. In the morning the sun was shining and the ground had dried out overnight. We were getting ready to leave. It was 9 in the morning. My son hitched the horses to the carriage, my sister-in-law came out to make the final preparations, and I was locking the door. When I was about to get into the carriage, the cleaning woman from the security office came and gave me a note signed by the head of security, which read, "Dear comrade, please come to the security office at 4 p.m. to receive information about your husband and nephew." The woman left. I was puzzled. How could I leave now? The three of us discussed and decided that I should stay to find out the result. I even said, "What a decent man the instructor from Tighina is. He said 10 days, and here he is informing us in just 3 days." We unhitched the horses, cooked something to eat, and I could hardly wait for the clock to strike 4 so I could go. At 3:30 I left. It was warm and pleasant, and I was wearing a scout skirt, a silk blouse, a silk scarf, and white sneakers. When I arrived at the security office, it was 3:45. The chief invited me into his office and offered me a seat. I said I didn't have much time to stay there and asked him to quickly tell me about my husband. He smiled sarcastically and asked who was at my home. I told him that my sister-in-law and my son were there. He said, "That's good, because we need to search your house." And then I realized that I was under arrest. "Am I being detained?" I asked, and without meaning to, I fell onto the chair that was next to me. Then he replied in a satisfied tone, "Yes, you are detained." He then called the woman who had summoned me in the morning, and before leaving the room, he ordered her to search me thoroughly. The woman didn't touch me. She just told me to put any money I had on the table. I had 5 rubles with me, and I placed them on the table. After a while, the chief entered with a militiaman and ordered him to take me to a cell. The most dreadful moment was when I heard the bolt locking behind me, taking away my freedom. In the cell, there were 2 other women arrested for profiteering, and since there was no bench, they were sitting on the cement floor. I remained standing like a wooden pillar, unable to speak or feel anything. Half an hour later, the door opened, revealing our cousin, who we had stayed with in Tighina. She asked if they had tricked me to catch me, and I admitted that they had. She had a blanket, spread it on the floor, and we sat down. We couldn't speak at all. At 6 o'clock, the chief came to us and asked, "Well, how do you feel?" I barely held back my tears and told him, "With your care, very well." At 7 o'clock, the militiaman brought me the food my son had sent, and said he had also brought a pillow, a blanket, and a coat, but they weren't accepted. He mentioned that my son cried a lot, but no one paid any attention to him. Of course, I didn't sleep a minute all night, being in a dreadful emotional state, almost to the point of madness. At 4 in the morning, the militiaman came in, and with great joy he said, "The war has started. You'll see, you'll be free." Indeed, we could hear the sound of German planes from outside. We waited anxiously for someone to come and release us, but there was no movement. At 10 in the morning, Jmur arrived, this time looking somewhat scared himself, and said, "Follow me." We went out. Outside, 2 horse-drawn carts were waiting for us. I was placed in one cart with my cousin, while the other cart carried the 2 other women. A militiaman with a gun in his hand accompanied us, and Jmur was in the other cart. While we were on the road, I saw many German planes flying overhead. We traveled about 20 kilometers, hearing the noise of the planes, which encouraged and delighted us. We reached the iron gates of the prison, where I had spent 2 weeks to hear news of my husband. There were about 300 of us. The gates opened, and we entered the prison courtyard, which was crowded with detainees. The yard was filled with great commotion and rush. The formalities began, taking photographs, recording physical characteristics, and collecting fingerprints. But we were all filled with hope that the planes flying above would soon free us. We were in good spirits and even told jokes. At 10 in the evening, they placed us in a room with women. It was so crowded that there was no place to sit except on our feet, and the air was so heavy it made us dizzy. The chaos was indescribable. Some were crying, others were arguing, and some were cursing. Everyone rushed towards us, demanding to know what was new. We shared what we knew, but interestingly, on that day no one thought to consider that we were human and needed food. At midnight, several militiamen came and took us out of the prison. They placed us in trucks and transported us to the train station. There we were put into dirty freight cars and given 2 loaves of hard black bread each. At 5 a.m. we departed, but no one knew where we were going, and there was no one to ask, as we were locked inside the cars. The train stopped rarely, only to take on water and coal for the locomotive. Crying, screaming, and fainting overwhelmed most of the people, but I remained frozen, devoid of any feeling. Our train did not stop at stations, only at places where it could take on water and coal for the locomotive. It was pulling 90 freight cars. During the journey, 3 women died in our car, and when we sounded the alarm by banging on the car door with our feet, the militiamen would come and scold us for disturbing them. The dead were decomposing. We had to remove them and throw them out into the fields to be scavenged by birds or beasts. We traveled like this for 2 weeks. One night, the train stopped at a station. In the morning at 5 a.m., we were taken out of the cars and saw a horrifying sight. Hundreds of security officers and German shepherds awaited us. I saw that the station was named Kazan. We were in the center of Russia by the Volga River. We were put into trucks and taken towards the city. We were filthy and exhausted, having gone without a proper wash for 2 weeks. They hadn't even given us enough drinking water. When we disembarked, I noticed that the prison resembled a church. Later, I learned that it was the cathedral of Our Lady of Kazan, the most beautiful and wealthy cathedral in Russia, which had now been turned into a shelter for unfortunate, innocent detainees.